more than just 18 wheels moving products around the country. Trucking is complex, and its people are passionate. Accommodating a diverse driving workforce, ever-changing regulations, supply chain demands, and new technologies all present their own challenges, but in trucking, the creative and the innovative succeed. Let's understand the people that drive and support the trucking industry, and welcome to Garner Trucking's Beyond the Cab. Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Cab. I'm your host, Tim Krolsky, and with me today, a special guest. Very honored to have Mr. Brian Dicken, who is the Vice President of Advocacy and Strategic Initiatives. That's a mouthful all on its own. With the Toledo Regional Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you, Brian, for coming in today. We've got a pretty interesting topic, I think, and especially for truck drivers, but not only drivers, but just your regular motorists through a specific area, and we're going to get into the detail of that today. But before we get too far, Brian, could you just share with me a little bit about your background? Is Toledo home for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Bowling Green. But hey, thank you very much for having me down to have this conversation. We really appreciate that opportunity to get more people informed about what's going on.
Absolutely. So BG was originally home. Did you go to school at BG or?
Yep, I graduated from high school there and then went on to BGSU.
Okay,
and
so you're a Falcon, huh?
I'm a Falcon. Did my 4.5 years there.
It's so taboo in the community of Toledo, huh?
That's right.
For not being a Rocket. Shame on you.
Well, I married one, and then I went on to do some graduate work at UT. So hopefully that buys me a little bit of street cred.
Balances you out. What was your courses of study there?
Yeah, so I did political science and economics for my undergrad. And I thought that was a good mix to understand how the economy and politics play together.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think really great at it from the conversations that we've had and getting to meet you. I've learned quite a bit already. So, what brings you then to the Toledo Chamber? How do you make that jump?
Yeah, so coming out of college, I had the real honor of working for Congressman Paul Gilmore. In the district and out in D.C. for about 6 years. Had a chance to go to the White House and do some work for the vice president for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then said I'm tired of high rent in D.C. and came back to Ohio and got involved here. And I spent about 7 or 8 years working for statewide elected officials, representing them with businesses and the communities in Northwest Ohio for 7 or 8 years.
Okay, all right. I got to ask, which vice president?
I was there with Cheney.
Okay. Right.
Incredible experience. Got to see and do a lot of things. And anytime you have a chance to be in proximity with somebody like that, you always learn a few things.
Yeah.
Even when you don't know it.
That's when you just turn into a sponge, I would imagine. That time in Washington, D.C., I'm sure was invaluable to where you are today and the work that you're doing at the chamber. So one of the things that we've had some conversation on, I think, again, kind of draws back to a lot of the work that's been done here on our interstates and our state routes. I think Ohio does an exceptional job of care and maintenance and improving and those types of things when it comes to our roadways. I think much better than most other of our surrounding states, if I'm just being blatantly honest, painfully honest. I know the improvements here on I-75 with having 3 lanes now here from Findlay to Toledo has been an outstanding achievement. While it was painful at the time, I think the dividends have really paid off on that. But now we have an opportunity down towards the Columbus area, and Brian, really what brings you here today is an opportunity where there was a study that was happening on Route 23. Can you tell us a little bit about what that study was and what's going on there?
Yeah, no. I think, to your earlier comment about the great job that Ohio's done, we were recently in the state up north, and as we crossed the state line, my daughter said, well, we're in Michigan now, why don't they ever fix the roads? So, the fact that somebody at 8 can feel that, I think is a testament to the job that Ohio's done to maintain the roads and try and get ahead of some of the problems.
Absolutely.
Which is it's a little bit discouraging then to know that we've done a great job in the state and to get into this issue with US 23 just north of Columbus through Delaware. Mm-hmm. And this is an area that has seen a lot of growth over 30 years. There's been a couple of studies that have been done to identify some of those problems and call for some solutions. And so a year and a half or so ago, we were really encouraged when ODOT, TMACOG, and MORPC, those are the two regional planning organizations for Toledo and Columbus area, those three came together and funded a study to look at how do we achieve free-flowing traffic between Toledo, Northwest Ohio, and Columbus.
Right.
Anybody who's been through there recently know you've got 38 stoplights that you have to go through in Delaware County from Waldo to 270.
It's almost hard to believe that it's actually 38, but having traveled through there many times, your options can be somewhat limited if you're going to try to avoid those. For those of us who've driven a tractor trailer and understand the kind of mechanics of starting and stopping, it further slows things down at every stoplight. And of course, those types of things, you want to have an atmosphere and roadways that are safe, and you've got to be able to protect motorists from each other as far as those stop and go situations. So it's somewhat important, but as far as the flow of commerce, those types of situations are a little bit more difficult. So the study itself, when did that start?
It was about a year ago this time.
Okay.
So a little over a year ago. It was supposed to be a 2-year study looking at different options to alleviate the congestion, address some of the safety concerns that are through there. And so that came to an end about 2 weeks ago. Pretty abruptly.
But it was supposed to be a 2-year study.
It was supposed to be a 2-year study.
Okay, and so in kind of your estimations and understanding, what's happened that's kind of brought that to a halt?
I think we're still trying to understand that. We've had some conversations with officials at transportation, and one of the comments they made was, well, there was significant opposition.
Okay.
So the natural question is, what does that mean? Is it 20, 30, 300 letters of opposition, and really didn't get a straight answer about what that means. It feels like it's pretty subjective.
Okay.
There's been a comment that the benefits don't outweigh the cost of trying to come to a solution. And, when we really look at it long term, throughout the entire corridor and impacting the entire state, I'm not sure that's a valid argument either.
Right.
When we look at other projects that have been done to address safety, promote economic opportunities for other places.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting kind of the first time that we met, and part of the conversation that we had, and I wasn't aware, that there is a major project planned being started just south of Columbus, involving I-75, I-74, I-73. Can we talk a little bit about that and what your understanding is of that project?
Yeah. So there's a great project in the works that's really about connectivity from Michigan all the way into the Carolinas and Myrtle Beach. And it's usually referred to as the 73, 74, 75 corridor. And again, it's about connectivity and how do we get our part of the country better connected with the Southeast. There's a lot of tourism opportunities, but there's also a lot of commerce and manufacturing and logistics that's important that we can capitalize on.
Right.
That's what we do in Ohio. We build things, we ship things, and when we're in a community up here in Northwest Ohio where you're within a day's drive of 60% of the population, having connectivity that is safe and efficient is absolutely critical to our success.
I agree with that. I think that this I-75 corridor all by itself is so impactful north to south, but to be able to kind of stretch over to the east, it gets a bit cumbersome. You've got to take some of those state routes, regular state routes, to find your way to the next interstate. It becomes a little tough.
Right. And quite frankly, who wants to go through D.C. at rush hour?
Right. So fair. So true.
So, we really do have to make sure that we've got good options to get throughout the country. And they need that connectivity to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That door swings both ways, and it helps commerce throughout the nation at that point, and that's can be pretty meaningful relationships. As an industry, we try to stay pretty focused on where our problems are at. I know we have a major problem. Actually, the number 2 congested area in the United States is just south of us here in a little city called Cincinnati. The I-71, I-75 merge there is actually, it's number 2 on the top 100 list of most congested places. So pretty awful to be on that list, and we don't want to continue to exacerbate the problem by having other areas that follow that same sort of congestion. So getting back to the study a little bit, we're taking this trip down 23. We're taking a look and figuring out, okay, what's the best solutions? What are those solutions? What do they look like? What's something that's practical, or a couple of solutions that would be practical for diffusing that portion of 23 in Delaware?
Yeah. So as ODOT and the team came together, they identified about 6 or 7 different alternatives to what we currently have. There was a couple that went to the west and connected in around 33 in the Marysville, Dublin area to go that way. There was a couple that went to the east, connecting in on 71. There was the option to make significant improvements to the existing 23 corridor, and then everybody's favorite, do nothing. Mm-hmm. So those were where they started. And developed those over the past year, and I think there's some validity and some opportunity with some of those, especially connecting into the east. Knowing where we're seeing growth and development now, it makes sense to have that connectivity through 71.
Yeah, for sure. What so the opposition side of things, I have to imagine, probably will include some of those landowners. If you opt to do something outside of 36 that runs through the east side there and get you over to 71 off of 23.
Yeah. So one of the options that was considered was looking at that 36-37 connection between 23 and 71. I think looking back historically, that was probably an option 30, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. That might have been. But if you've been through there recently, there's a lot of housing. There's a lot of businesses. It's a 2-lane road right now. So there would be significant cost in trying to do that, and quite frankly, disrupting a lot of people's lives that we don't probably need to do.
Right.
So that probably doesn't really feel like a good option. So I think we would agree with the study there that's not viable. But I think what we know is if we move a little bit north of that, there's some opportunity. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen the development yet that has occurred in the southern part of that corridor. To build a connector from 23 to 71, it's about a 15-mile stretch.
Okay.
Predominantly farmland at this point. Look, when you start talking about farmland and development, that gets controversial at times, especially when one owner maybe can take advantage of that and the neighbor doesn't.
Right.
But we know that in a region that's going to grow by 1 million people, that's going to grow by 1 million jobs over the next 20 years, in a corridor that is going to have truck traffic double.
Yep. Well, you're accommodating that population, and obviously then the job growth has to be there along with it. So that commerce all is just going to continue to excel.
Yeah, it's not going to get any better.
Right.
And so really taking this opportunity to identify a true long-term solution, we have a pretty narrow window to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because any project you do, that's going to take you 4 or 5 years to get done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the design, the permitting, and construction, it might even be a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely achievable. But what it's going to take is a little bit of fortitude and leadership to make that happen.
Absolutely. So, what do you expect the cost of doing something like that might be if you made that 15-mile stretch? If everything was perfect, assuming okay, it's a green light. What's the cost?
Yeah. So the initial cost estimates that have come out is right around 1.1 to 1.2 billion.
Okay.
With a B.
Yep.
Not exactly pocket change.
I feel like everything starts with a B now. It doesn't matter what we're talking. We're into the T's as a nation, so we might as well be in the B's at the state level at least, right?
That's right. I remember when I was in D.C. People used to say, a million here, a million there. You start talking real numbers. That seems small.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is not cheap. It's not inexpensive. It's not easy. If that were the case, it would have been done a long time ago. Some of the other options get up into 2.5, 2.8 billion in terms of cost. And that's definitely a harder pill to swallow.
Oh yeah.
But we also know it's not going to get easier. It's also not going to get any less expensive as we look at inflation and the cost of materials and the cost of labor to make these things happen.
Cost of diesel.
Yeah, coming down, I think I saw probably an average of about $5.40. And unfortunately for you guys, I think that might be cheap later
it's
this summer.
deflating. It's very deflating, that's for sure. I guess the study itself has stalled out, and one of the things that I was hopeful of as we had this conversation is really understanding. I guess one of the things I should step back and say is I appreciate where we live in the community we live in here. Hancock County has kind of stepped up, and we're taking a look at that Route 15 piece of, before you get down to 23, that we need to make our roadways a little bit safer and start to shut off some of those intersections and get a little closer to a limited access highway, which I think, ultimately still improves that traffic flow. Certainly it might be an opportunity then, if you get enough of it done, that the road speed can go up a bit and continue to create a safe atmosphere for trucks and for passenger vehicles to get from point A to point B. But it doesn't stop that bottleneck down in Delaware. So the question becomes, the study has stopped. We're at a standstill. What's the next steps here in efforts to get that rekindled?
Yeah, so if there's anything I've ever learned is the body's not dead until it's well buried.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've hit a little bit of a roadblock here. But what we know is that there's still opportunities to try and influence decision makers around this. So we're actively working with the business community, economic development throughout that corridor to go back to our elected officials in Columbus. And we've gotten a great response from our state legislators that we've spoken to about it. So that next step is, we're going to make an ask to the governor. Make this a priority. Help us address safety and connectivity for all of Ohio.
Absolutely. So if as a listener is hearing what's going on and has some strong beliefs about what that situation down in Delaware is, they've been stopped by 34 of the 38 stoplights. How do they get involved? How do they help this initiative along?
Yeah, no, great question. Certainly one way is reach out to your state legislator, let them know of your concerns. Reach out to the governor's office, let them know. And we have a lot of information available on our website, ToledoChamber.com, where you can get a little bit more of the background of what's going on, why we and others feel that this initiative is so important to the success of our state.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, and I guess I find it interesting. I'm having a conversation right now with a representative of the Toledo Chamber of Commerce, and you would think that conversation probably would be had somewhere down closer to Columbus. Why is this so important to the Toledo Chamber?
You're right. It's 120 miles away from Toledo.
Mm-hmm.
It is really important, not to just Toledo, but Findlay and Defiance and Fremont, Bryan, Montpelier. This is about Northwest Ohio. And just as Ohio has in itself a lot of strengths in manufacturing and logistics and warehousing, we have that in Northwest Ohio. And so we feel that having better connectivity and having a safer way to get to Columbus allows us to more fully participate in that success. And it's a two-way conversation. We have things that we have to get to Central Ohio and beyond, and people in Central Ohio need to be able to access our markets. They need to be able to access the Port of Toledo, one of the seaports that we have in the Great Lakes, to be able to get things out. In a year and a half, so in 2024, we're looking at the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge. Mm-hmm. So this will be the third crossing in Detroit to connect our region and the rest of the country to Canada. And why is that so important? There's more than 300 Canadian-owned businesses in the state of Ohio. Canadian is our largest trading partner. In fact, if you take the next 7 or 8 destinations, it still doesn't equal what we do with Canada. So this is all coming. We know that there's more traffic coming. You mentioned the bottleneck in Cincinnati. We were very supportive of the improvements to the Brent Spence Bridge for the same reasons. It's about connectivity. And we understand that when you have safe modes of transportation, when you can easily get to different markets, we all succeed.
I think that's really well said, Brian. I appreciate those thoughts and sentiments, and certainly from the trucking industry standpoint, anything that we can do to make the roads a bit safer, a little more free-flowing, makes the job a little bit easier. And frankly, we've got 11 hours of drive time, and anything you can do to expedite that process without making the roads less safe, by putting in those opportunities to be able to bypass those areas that we don't need to go through, I think it's just beneficial for all, and it helps commerce at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a great point on the time restrictions that you have that you can drive during the day. We had a conversation with somebody in the warehousing industry in this area. They said, we can only schedule our drivers 1 round trip a day to Columbus because we don't know if it's going to take 2 hours or 4 hours. And so when you have limited time frames that you can be on the clock, that makes it harder for you to do your job.
Right, and much less efficient.
It hurts the customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that in the industry right now, you have a shortage of drivers. So if you have to wait another week to deliver to a customer, that doesn't help your business. And the driver shouldn't have to feel that stress of trying to get there quickly. There are so many layers to this. It just makes sense to come up with a long-term solution that really works for everybody.
I agree. And I think really well said today. Brian, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming in, talking about a very important issue. Again, it affects not only trucking, but just the general motorist as you're trying to get back and forth from that Columbus area. And, of course, our state capital, so well-traveled. And as you point out, a lot of things being made, a lot of things being delivered, a lot of things being shipped, and a lot of things being passed through those areas. So pretty important topic. That's the time we have today. And again, Brian, thank you. This has been Tim Krolsky on another edition of Beyond the Cab.